Hello everyone, welcome back to Planet Coaster 2, welcome back to Utopia World. We're already in episode 5, I feel like. Over the last few weeks I've started powering through this series a bit more, been getting into the game again, which is great. To be honest with you, when I started working on the inside of this park, I really was struggling a bit to get the motivation to build. But once I started getting a few things in this area, it started coming together a bit, and I've had a bit more enthusiasm to play the game, which is great. So we've had sort of 3 episodes in 3 weeks, which is probably a record for me so far, apart from when obviously the game came out and we're all addicted to it. But yeah, I think it's sometimes a challenge with creative games like this to actually have the motivation to get in and play and build stuff. But it certainly pays off when you can get in the swing of things and start building stuff that you're happy with and actually be inspired to continue building. But anyway, let's talk about what we're building today. So the first thing that I put in is a flat ride, and after trying a couple of different options I settled on the Wipeout type ride, which I think is quite an old school ride that would fit into this park and this area quite nicely. I think one change that I'm really happy with this game is the amount of different colour options you can have for flat rides, and you can even change the sort of patterns on the side of the ride and all sorts. There's so much customization with it, which I've only sort of scratched the surface of really, but definitely something that they've improved in Planet Coaster 2. And then the next job really for this build was to fence this off, because the raised land we've got here, or the raised pathing rather we've got here, is just going to be for the queue and the exit of the flat ride. I thought I'd try my hand at not building an actual queue line and just using the regular path as queue, because the guests do use it that way if you've got it fenced off correctly and got barriers in the right place, which I believe we have here. So I think this is functioning properly by the time I've sort of finished the build. But it's again trial and error, because it's just, I'm still learning the game even though we've had it a while now. There's so many little features and stuff that I'm just sort of working out how to do properly. One thing I really like is that we can actually make the paths quite a lot thinner. I think that's really useful to do, and I'm starting to get to grips a bit better now with the tool where you can sort of can move your bits of path around. I don't know what that tool's called, but it basically means you can select the nodes of the path, and you can either select a segment and drag it across, or you can just select one node and it will pull the whole thing about. So I'm really sort of getting to grips with how that all works. So just sort of fencing all this off really, and that's pretty much all we're doing for the actual ride. I do add a few props and small clutter pieces and stuff around the ride and a bit of foliage and everything, but we're not going crazy with the theming here, because we've got to bear in mind this is still a low budget park, so everything's got to be feasible for a low budget park. I'd say this area they've probably spent quite a bit of money on in terms of their budget, because everything's sort of dressed up a little bit nicer. The theming looks quite polished, even though it's very basic. But with Western theming, it is something that you could see in a low budget park. And a park that actually inspired me quite a lot for this build was Knott's Berry Farm and their Wild West area. Obviously they've got Ghost Rider, the big, I think it's a GCI wooden coaster. That's actually one of my favourite wooden coasters to ride. I think it's fantastic. But they've also got some sort of Wild West town in their western area, and I think I'm going to draw quite a lot of inspiration from that area for this build, and try and do a few things that I don't normally do and that I haven't really done in the first game that much. So I'm hoping to have like some midway games and stuff like that, so like a gunslinger, and we can really then make use of the rotating pieces and the moving platforms, because I've not really used them much in this park, and I think we need a bit more kinetic energy in the sort of areas which are just flat rides and pathing and stuff. If we can get a little bit more going on other than just the sort of guest movement, I think that will be great. But anyway, sort of digressing a bit there, you can see now we're getting some of the props in. So I thought I'd do a slightly custom prop. This is meant to be sort of a trough that a horse would drink from, which you would probably see in a Wild West area. Only problem is we don't have any animals or horses or anything like that, any props like that. We obviously don't have a Western set yet, so it's just a case of using what we do have, and so using things like the hay bales and obviously the classic barrels and crates. And as they're recolorable now, you can get a little bit of variation. The default colours are pretty good for them anyway, to be honest, but I just wanted to change things up a little bit, and using some of the same planting that we've used in other areas. So obviously the cacti and the sort of long grass type stuff that we're sinking in all works pretty well for Western. And I think it's a really easy theme to make. As long as you've got some sort of wood pieces, you can pretty much build the Western theme however you want. We definitely have the pieces in the game to build it already. Chances are that they're probably going to release some of the Planet Coaster 1 themes once I finish this area. But then in which case, if we have got prop pieces that are more suitable, like, more suited to the area and better than the ones that I've built, then we can always go back and put them in at a later stage. Nothing's really finished yet in this area. The way I'm getting the motivation to build at the moment is I'm doing it bit by bit, and I'm thinking, what do I actually want to build? Right, I want to build a coaster, so I'm going to build a coaster. I want to build a restaurant building, so that's what I'm going to build. And then I got quite immersed in building this flat ride in the area around it. You can see that I'm doing a small stream and stuff like that, trying to make it make sense by by ending up in a small lake sort of thing. And that's what I'm trying to do. Just find things that I'm actually motivated to build, rather than worrying too much about loads of backstage pathing and stuff that can always be polished off later on when the rest of the area is complete. Like even later on, I start working on restaurant and an arcade building, and I don't actually do the interior for the arcade, and I only do a very basic interior for the restaurant. And that's just because I wanted to get a video out, to be honest. I just wanted to get to a point where it's complete enough for a video. So I thought we'll go back and do the interior for the arcade later on. So it's not necessarily finished, but it's in a good enough state to move on to the next video for the project, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think doing these sort of shorter builds probably works out a little bit better for my motivation, because I'm not getting really bogged down with a huge project each time I open the game. So I'm just doing a little bit here and there. And the time lapse that you see here is pretty much the full thing. I haven't been cutting anything out, just because there's not a huge amount of footage. It fits into about half an hour or so, which I think is fine for a video. So yeah, you're seeing the full build pretty much, apart from any time that I put it on pause or forgot to hit the record button or anything like that. Back to what we're actually building then. So loads more rock work, just copy pasting the rock work from the other side, which I think looks fun. I really like the way this stream looks, maybe slightly heavily themed for this area, but we'll go with the fact that the stream, or the idea that the stream, was already in the park when all this was built, and they just tidied it all up a little bit with some rock work. Maybe this is real rock. I mean, it looks like fake rock work, doesn't it? So probably not. But either way, I think even a low budget park can have nice nature sort of features around it. It just means we've got to be a bit careful when we're theming up buildings and not add all the tiny little details like Disney do, and do massive, huge, big set sort of pieces, because that's not going to be feasible for a park of this scale, or a park of this budget rather. Finishing this sort of area off then with some fencing, just using the same Viking fence again, except I've sunk it into the ground a little bit further, so it comes across as sort of just like these small wooden posts, which I think is quite fun. So it's not going to stop people crossing over it, but I think a lot of the time it is common sense that you know you're not going to cross over into the stream, basically. At this point, I used Taji's perfect circles to get some circle cutaways for some trees. I will try and post a link in the description to this workpiece item if I remember. I only just remembered then that I used a workshop item in this build, and it's kind of not even an item really, it's just a really useful tool. Probably one of the best things on the workshop, and it's literally just a piece of pathing. Then the next thing that I work on is some supports for, well, not supports, sorry, some canopies for the queue line for the coaster, and I wasn't really going to work on this area in this episode, but I felt that we needed something, and I just come across these cool looking canopies and thought I want to put them in the build, so I did. And then I went off on a bit of a tangent and ended up building a cover for the path for the queue line, just because it's going to get rather hot in this park, and we want to protect guests from the hot sun and the rain if we get a rainy day. So yeah, keeping this pretty straightforward, really didn't want to take away from the station too much, so just using the same sort of pieces, but making it so it sort of blends into the background, you know, it's not a really noticeable feature for the guests. And yeah, struggling a little bit there, I think, with the with the snap tool, just trying to get it on the right axis. Sometimes if you put a few pieces together, they just will not snap to the right grid that you want them to. You know, when you've got the world axes and the relative axes, just, yeah. But all parts of the quirks of this game. So yeah, nothing really too crazy about this structure at all. Just again using a lot of the wooden beams and a lot of the wooden pillars, and just wanted to get this covered up really. I will go back at some point and work a little bit more on the queue line, because I think we need to do a little bit more for it. Maybe just some really basic props and more crates and stuff like that. And a bit of foliage, I think will be fine. Doing a bit of lighting now then, so again sinking the spotlights in to give a bit more area lighting, and then for the sort of appearance of it, we're just using the fairy lights again. At this point I knew that I had to make a custom lamp post, because the in-game ones do not fit the theme whatsoever. Sorry, just taking a sip of drink. So yeah, these are pretty straightforward really, just using pillars, stacked up wooden pillars and some bracket pieces, and then the Viking lamps. And I do double these up because they're a little bit too dark. We do probably need to find another way of getting more lighting into this area at some point, because I just don't think these are bright enough even when I have doubled them up. You can sort of see the area of lighting that they add. You can see that I'm playing about a bit with the spotlights as well, trying to get a bit more light there, but I couldn't work out how to do it with it looking effective. So again, that's probably something that I need to come back to at a later stage. But yeah, just sort of getting the foundations in. You know, I think we need to do a bit more on the lighting all around the park, to be honest. It's not something that I've focused on that much up to this point, because I've mainly been focusing it on the daytime stuff. But yeah, adding a little spotlight there as well, just to the theming in front of the coaster station. And now we move on to our restaurant building, and this is obviously going to be a quick serve restaurant type thing, which is probably you know, it's probably the best option for a theme park, especially a low budget one. You don't tend to see that many sit down restaurants in theme parks anyway. I know there are a few. I know Disney and Universal have a few, but personally for me, on the very occasional times that I get to go to a theme park, I just find that you don't really have time for a sit-down meal at lunchtime. I think last time I went to a theme park, I literally just had a sandwich and a cup of coffee, and then that was it. It had a little Costa still. I mean, that probably cost me about £10.50 or something. But yeah, you find theme parks usually have these sort of quick serve restaurants. So you have a few different stands with different food, sort of all in a row, and you can pick what you want, or you just order from a kiosk and pick it up. So that's what we're doing here. We're going to have a chief beef, and we're going to have the Simply Vegan or whatever it's called, and the Gulpy soda, and that gives guests, you know, enough choice for a small sort of restaurant building like this. We do give it a slight interior. I didn't want to go crazy with the interior, but I do end up putting in some seating inside and play about a bit with the sort of tray holder bits, which I'll explain a bit better when we get there. At the moment, I'm just trying to finish off the actual structure. And I'm really pleased actually with how the windows turned out here. So doing custom windows again, cutting away the walls and sinking them in, I think is the best way to do it. Can't do it all the time on this build just because of how the pieces work, but yeah, I think it works well here, and it looks clean on the inside as well. Like the interior of this looks clean, and it just all came together pretty easily as well. To be honest, it's nice when when things just work out like that. In terms of the details on the outside, we're having a few different sort of layers and a few of your typical sort of Western details on the building. Nothing too crazy, and using lots of these wooden beams and pillars everywhere because they just work so well, especially if you vary up the wood colours again a bit. I think the colour of this really adds to it as well. It's nice and bright and vibrant, but still screams Western. And yeah, so we put those windows in, copied them across everywhere, and then start outlining the shape of the arcade, which is going to go next to it. Just because I wanted to make sure I had enough room and everything like that. But we go back to that. We don't actually work on it just yet. I wanted to get the restaurant finished first before we go over to the arcade, and I wanted to work on the interior, which again, there's not too much to it. Firstly, I'm just doing some more of the detailing on the outside, and I think, yeah, it was a little bit more tricky to squeeze that third window in there, or that second window rather. So I just, in the end, just put some wall pieces on the side, and that seems to work out fine. And so doing it like that. But yeah, covering up all the corners, just, you know, sometimes you just have to spend quite a bit of time polishing off the edges to make everything look nice and clean. But one thing I did kind of envision for this is having some sort of saloon doors. I feel like I need some sort of building with some saloon doors. Maybe we'll do that on the arcade, or maybe we'll do that on another building later on. But it didn't really work out for this one because it just sort of get in the way, I suppose. Putting the sign on then, we're going for Slinging Saloon as the name. Pretty generic Wild West, but I think it works. I think it's quite fun. And now you can see the interior stuff happening. So again, very straightforward, just some planks of wood to be the counter that sort of goes all the way around. I was quite inspired by a build that Wix did in his Moana water park a while ago, and obviously it is a lot more detailed than this. But yeah, he just had this really cool idea of putting these tray sort of holder sections on. I don't know what you'd call these really. But it's the metal bit where you put your tray and then push it along to select all the different food and drink you want. And I thought, yeah, it's a really fun idea, so I thought I'd do that using the modern fences. It would work absolutely perfectly for this idea, and you can sort of see what it's supposed to be once I get it in. And then other than that, really, for the interior, we're just putting in a few tables and a backstagey door type thing, which will probably lead to a kitchen, which we haven't put in yet because we've got a train track right behind it. But maybe that's something we can consider for a future episode, sorting something out there with a kitchen or whatever. Like I say, there probably will be an episode later on where I'll go back and just do backstage stuff for all different areas of the park, because at the moment we've just sort of got make-believe backstage stuff. So like, here's a staff building that we're not really doing anything with yet. Doing some lighting then for inside the restaurant, and the putting in some wooden beams, which I think just adds a little bit more decor to the inside of the building. I probably do need to go back and focus a bit more on the lighting in here because it is quite dark, but I'm never quite sure how the lighting works in the game, because when you go into an interior it seems to take a few seconds for the lighting to correctly adjust. So it looks really dark when you first go in, and then it then the lighting kicks in. It's really weird how it works, but anyway, putting a roof on now, covering all that up, so just using the aquatic corrugated roof. It's not exactly the theme that we're going for, but you won't see it from guest level anyway, so I wanted, from a realism point of view, to have a more generic sort of piece of roof, and it's nice and thin as well, which a lot of the other roof pieces aren't. Moving on then to the decals, again using the moss decals, using them the same colour as the actual wood texture itself to give it a much more subtle feel, with some moss pieces and some cracks in the wall, but not as in your face as would do for a more sort of heavily themed build. This could be wear and tear of the actual theme park building, or it could be a theming element they put in. But yeah, I've actually really enjoyed the challenge of trying to go for a realistic sort of approach whilst making something that still looks nice, but without going crazy with the theming. I think that can sometimes be a real challenge to just try and get that sort of balance, and I think so far I think it's working out quite well. But yeah, I think we've crossed over the part where you don't know if you're going to continue with a park or a build. I think I've got to the point now where I've got the ball rolling. We're cooking on gas. We're actually getting somewhere with it, and it can always be tricky as well, especially with sort of the way YouTube is at the moment. The videos really sort of drop down after the first month or so. Well, after the first 2 months really of the game being released. Over Christmas time, everything just got quieter. Not so many videos up, and videos not getting so many views. I've found that my view counts really drop for any videos. Normally I get a lot more views on my Parkitect videos, which was another theme park game I play, but I've not been hitting anything sort of over about 430, 450 in the last few months, which is kind of a shame because quite a lot of thought goes into the videos and takes time editing and stuff. But I do I do really appreciate the people that are watching the videos, so thank you to everyone that's still tuned into the channel. But I think it's the same for everyone at the moment, to be honest. YouTube have been messing around with the algorithm and stuff, and that coupled with the fact that I think people are struggling, like that there's not as many people playing Planet Coaster 2, obviously, as there was sort of for the initial first 2 months or so. We've had loads of great fixes and the game's now a lot better than it was on launch, but obviously that initial sort of honeymoon period, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, the initial stage where everyone was absolutely loving the game, or well, not everyone, but when loads of people were playing it, you can easily get burnt out, and I think I did as well, probably sort of over the Christmas period and the start of January. I struggled a bit to get into the game. I think I've got enthusiasm back now, got the mojo back a bit to play and continue with this build. so I'm looking forward to seeing where it takes us. In my personal life, I'm starting a new job in a couple of weeks, so I probably won't have as much time. You know what it's like when you're new somewhere, you have to focus all your energy into that. But hopefully I'll still get on some evenings and weekends and manage to continue on with this build. But yeah, like I say, I appreciate all of you for watching the videos and tuning in to the channel. I'm sort of saying that as if we're finishing up the video here, but we've still got another 10 minutes or something, or 5 minutes. The last thing that I do really then is build this arcade, and it's a lot more straightforward, this building. It's a lot more plain and boring. I'm not crazy about how it turned out, but I think it's probably realistic enough. Oddly enough, I couldn't do the shape that I wanted to do here with the pieces that we had, because for some reason with this wood set they're a really odd shape, so I just ended up keeping it square. And one fun little technique I found here was putting a Minotaur head in and turning it round and sticking a couple of eyes on it to replicate the sort of bull type heads that you see in Western builds. So yeah, that adds a little bit more fun detail to the building, I guess. And then just putting some fencing around and top to sort of symbolise a balcony type thing. Ideally this would be a 2-storey building, but I didn't want it raised any higher than a restaurant. I didn't want it to take away from the restaurant, so I think what we've got here is fine. Obviously I do want some more buildings in this area with similar sort of architecture. The idea was to have some facades going all the way around this sort of plaza, but I didn't really have room for that once I put a restaurant in. So we will find some other spaces to put some more Western buildings and probably close this area off a little bit, because this is probably the park probably won't go any further back at this point, but I'm not too sure yet. Didn't really know how to polish this area off, so what I ended up doing first of all was putting some clutter pieces around the arcade because I thought it looked really plain, and then just using the same stuff again, so recolouring some pieces slightly, so your crates and your barrels and whatnot. Put a little sign outside the front of the restaurant, and I think the final thing that I do is some basic planters and some foliage just to polish off the area, get it thumbnail worthy, and get the build complete to a place where I'm happy with it for now. So that's it. I'm going to stop rambling and leave you with the rest of the time lapse and some cinematic shots at the end as always. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode.